I'm from Shelburne, Ontario. It's as rural as it gets. And when I grew up there, in the 80s and 90s, it was essentially a Canadian Texas. I'm 14 at the time of this story. After Catholic school, us kids would often get together to roam in packs throughout the woods. We'd drink whatever booze we can get, and on one occasion, scored some crappy weed, which was a huge deal for us. You know, basically as free-spirited as a rural, religious upbringing will allow, as far as we could distance ourselves from our sheltered little boxes and escape into our own little world. This day, someday in late October, 92, it was just as any normal day would start out. It was pretty sunny and hot, which was unusual because A, it's late October, and B, we're 2.5 hours north of Toronto, so we're pretty far up. But there it was, palpable heat and all. It was a day of boring Catholic lectures, and we were sick of the long day, and we just wanted the outdoors, which was basically like video games for us, which most of us didn't have. So, we're well on our merry way to go hiking onto Highway 10. It was a group of 4, me and 2 other guys, plus a girl. School ended at 4 p.m. for us, and we met up a few hours after that. So, it was already dusk going on to dark. We thought nothing of it, as we hiked all the time in the woods. Though, to be fair, we had never much ventured outside our little town, let alone checked out trails stemming from the major highway. But being 14 and sheltered, we were desperate to be daring. We found a trail and made our way down it. It got very steep and thickened with vine, and getting dark, this was terribly difficult. Oh yeah, I didn't have the right battery for our flashlights, and my parents wouldn't even let us be out here, let alone out there with their flares. One friend managed to sneak us a tent from his dad's barn, and brought us firewood and matches as he snuck out, which seemed good enough to us. After the steepness leveled out, and the vine thickness only slightly so, it started on a long incline, which brought us to this hill that overlooked cliff faces and huge mountains and valleys. It wasn't like the flat rows of cornfields you see in Sudbury. A real pretty sight. A real pretty sight. We settled on this one spot, setting up tent and campfire. My buddy, let's call him Greg, took out the beers. I took out the joint of pretty bad weed, and the girl, let's call her Sally, began making out with her boyfriend. Let's call him Kyle. It was a classic, awkward teenage phase experience, the magical kind that make you feel self-conscious and weird at the same time. But now, makes you feel all warm and fuzzily nostalgic, you know? Well, anyway, we were just sitting there, and I suddenly had to go to the bathroom. I headed down the hill face, the part with no path. It was just wild, bushy grass. I walked down for a good little while, and found an empty clearing out of sight from the others to take a leak. As I was finishing up, a glint, just a real small speck of shiny light, popped up far in the distance in the valley. If I had to take a shot in the dark, I'd say it was a good half a kilometer from us. It was unmistakably a flame, not like a huge fire, but a small contained one, like a candle, but large enough to be seen far away. So maybe like a lamp? Anyways, I figured some other people were enjoying this little sanctuary, just like us. The flame floated forward, jiggling up and down. I was really high and drunk at the time, so for some reason, I kept looking at it. I was fixed for maybe 5 minutes when it stopped. It just stopped. Not the flame. It was still there. But it had stopped moving forward or up and down. Now I think whoever, or whatever it was, they were turning to look at me. Maybe. But it was pitch dark, and I was perhaps a quarter mile away. Okay, yeah, we were being really loud, laughing hysterically, and just chatting and yelling. So maybe this guy had good hearing and zeroed in on our location. Honestly, it's not a detail I care about anymore, having thought this through so many times. So I zip up and climb up the hill, leaving the lone candle-holding stranger be. I go up and hang out with my friends, and I told them what I saw, saying how odd it was to see someone out with us at this time. They wanted to invite this guy over at first. We should holler at him, they said, or something like that. I told them, well, I'll show you where I saw them. So we climbed down the side of the hill I went and gazed across the valley. 2 flames, floating in the darkness lower in the valley, bobbing up and down towards our direction. And they're closer, like less than 200 yards away. You know that moment when something you have no reason to believe is sinister just feels sinister? It's indescribable, like some sort of foreshadowing on God's part, trying to pull you from harm's boundary. But at the time, being a teen and with a group mentality, no one wanted to be afraid. Everyone wanted to own this land. Hey, we shouted to them, in a really casual way, like we were inviting them over. But deep down, I had a no good feeling about it. Maybe, though, I thought, if we didn't act afraid, it wouldn't lure them in. Or maybe it's cool. They're just lost. Maybe they need shelter. Or whatever explanation I thought was innocuous. They made no verbal response, but a physical one. They stopped dead in their tracks, and at this point they were close enough that you could hear the rustling beneath their feet. Maybe. Or maybe it was my nervous imagination. Sometimes I wonder if my buddies were as scared as I was at that time. But now, they were dead silent, and still in all regards. We were still, and they were still. I don't like this, Sally said more covertly. It was then we decided to walk up the hill. I wish we didn't. We got back to the top, just like a 10-second walk up. And there were 2, then 3, then 4 other flames lighting up other parts of the valley, parts not far from us at all, and they were all zeroing in on us. A collective, oh crap, washed over us, and we started packing our stuff up quickly. 4 flames bobbing up and down slowly, from the bottom of the ravine up the steep side of the hill we were on. If we sat there for more than 10 minutes, they'd be breathing right down our neck. It felt like forever to pack up our things, and none of us bothered to look down the ravine during that time. We all packed silently, scared. Were our parents playing a prank on us for being out so late? So, everyone had packed, and the others were already running back up the path we came from. Just as I was zipping up my bag, I turned around to look down just before running off. I wish I hadn't. I saw from all throughout the ravine, up to a good kilometer or two away, a few dozen or so candles walking towards our position, bobbing up and down, the motion of a person walking with a candle in their hands. In a few minutes, it went from being a few candles to being at least 20. Holy crap, we must have really tampered with something not accustomed to company. But the worst part was when they were close enough. Remember how before I said one of the candle holders was a few hundred yards away? Well, now there were two that were very close, like approaching that spot where I was going to pee. And it was at this point that I realized they weren't walking. They were running up the ravine, and I could hear how loud they were stomping, how the twigs were breaking underneath their feet, and most unsettling, how they were wheezing and panting. It was anything but natural sounding. It didn't sound like what an out-of-breath human should sound like. It was a mix of a pant and a sob, but strained, almost too high-pitched to be a man. Kind of like the yelp of a dog or coyote. But it was too hoarse for that. It sounded like the basis of actual words, not random cries. Nonetheless, I screamed like a little girl and bolted. My friends and I ran and didn't look back that night. Pure adrenaline took us safely out of that forest, and we were more relieved than ever to be out of it. We were fully expecting our parents to be behind this. We'd get home, and the lights would be on, we thought, with our parents ready to tell us about how good they got us for sneaking out, how we got so scared over a few candles, and how we shouldn't be out of that time anyways. The only thing is, when I got home, the lights were still off. My window was still open even, totally untouched. I crept in, peered down the halls. Yep, parents were still sound asleep. I checked with my friends the next morning, and they all reported back the same. One thing I never told my friends was about how I went back to the same spot some months later. I was the one who knew the way, had just followed me that night, so they couldn't have gone themselves even if they wanted to. So I went, months later, on one of the calmer days during the harsh winter. It must have been January 1993, many months after the first incident. And on this particular day, it was freezing. I was going to tell them what I saw. Honest. I was gonna tell the others that I went back. But when I got there, I decided I wouldn't tell anyone. I wouldn't tell them that I found that old trail. I wouldn't tell them that I walked back up to the hill in broad daylight. And God forbid, not even the priest in my church's confession booth will ever hear this. But I swear to God, when I got there were hundreds of candles, stacked, dug into the ground, melted, burnt out, in the middle of Canadian winter. I couldn't tell you how many charred candles there were, and there was burnt firewood, lots of it, like very recently burnt. Whatever was out there that night, it was waiting for us to come back, and it waited through winter.